What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Why do we die? And what is the point of it all? These are the kind of questions that tormented one of the greatest minds in history. A man who had everything: fame, wealth, a loving family, and a legacy that would outlive him. And yet he came to believe that life was utterly meaningless. This is the story of Leo Tolstoy, a man who stood at the pinnacle of success, but found himself staring into an abyss so dark that it nearly consumed him. Stay with me as we unravel how he fell into despair, how he clawed his way back, and what his journey can teach us about our own search for meaning. Tolstoy's crisis wasn't something that happened overnight. It crept slowly, like a shadow growing longer with each passing day. By his 50s, he had achieved everything society told him would bring happiness: literary immortality through War and Peace and Anna Karenina, immense wealth, and a large family. And yet he couldn't escape one gnawing thought: what does it all mean if death erases everything? In a confession he wrote, "I felt that what I had been standing on had collapsed. The truth was that life is meaningless." He became obsessed with this question, unable to sleep or find peace. He described it as being like a man lost in a forest, running in circles, desperate to find a way out, but only getting more confused with every step. Suicide seemed like the only logical escape. He even hid ropes from himself to avoid temptation. But something kept him alive. A faint hope that there might still be an answer to his torment. Tolstoy turned first to science and philosophy, hoping they would provide clarity. But instead of answers, they only deepened his despair. Science told him how things worked, but not why. It reduced life to atoms and processes, cold facts that offered no comfort. Philosophy was no better. It dissected his questions, but never solved them. He wrote bitterly, "Philosophy does not reply. It merely asks the same questions in a more complex form." No matter where he looked, he found himself trapped in an endless spiral of why questions. Why live? Why create? Why love? Every answer led back to death, the ultimate eraser of all meaning. As Tolstoy searched for meaning intellectually, he began to examine his own life, and what he found horrified him. Here was a man who preached virtue but lived indulgently, who celebrated humanity's struggles in his novels, but felt disconnected from those around him. Even his family, his wife Sophia and their many children, felt like strangers to him at times. He wrote, "I could see them but felt no emotional connection, as if there were shadows passing through my life." His wealth became a burden, a constant reminder of how far removed he was from the simplicity he craved. And religion? He revisited Christianity but found himself repelled by its dogma and hypocrisy. Desperate for purpose, Tolstoy threw himself into productivity. He wrote essays on morality, advocated for education reform, and criticized government oppression. For a time, these efforts distracted him from his despair. But even this began to feel hollow, a way to avoid confronting life's deeper questions rather than answering them. He started to see his own writing as vain and self-serving. What is the point of creating, he wondered, if death will erase it all? Tolstoy then turned outward, observing how others around him coped with life's apparent futility. He noticed 4 distinct approaches. Ignorance. Many avoided existential questions altogether and simply lived as if they didn't exist. Hedonism. Some sought distraction through pleasure, wealth, relationships, entertainment, but these were fleeting. Despair. Others acknowledged life's meaninglessness but endured it anyway. Faith. A small group believed in something greater than themselves, a divine order that gave their life's purpose. Tolstoy envied those who lived with faith but couldn't reconcile it with his rational mind. During this time, Tolstoy became obsessed with death, not as an abstract concept, but as an unavoidable reality waiting for us all. In a confession, Tolstoy recounts an Eastern fable to illustrate his existential crisis. In this tale, a traveler fleeing from a beast descends into a dry well and clings to a branch. Below, a dragon awaits his fall. Above, the beast watches. 2 mice, one black and one white, gnaw at the branch, symbolizing the passage of time through day and night. Despite the impending doom, the traveler notices drops of honey on the leaves and licks them, momentarily distracted from his fate. Tolstoy uses this analogy to convey his awareness of life's fragility and the inevitability of death, with the honey representing fleeting pleasures that lose their sweetness in the face of mortality. For years, Tolstoy distracted himself by licking drops of honey from nearby leaves. His family, fame, creative work, but none provided lasting comfort. In the 1880s, Tolstoy began to believe that the trappings of his privileged life were part of the problem. He saw his wealth and fame as barriers to truth and simplicity. He became obsessed with the idea of renouncing everything: his estate, his royalties, even his family. to live a life closer to the peasants he admired. Tolstoy began wearing simple clothes, working the land alongside the laborers, and giving away possessions. He even tried to relinquish the copyrights to his works, sparking a bitter feud with his wife Sophia, who feared for their children's inheritance. This tension between his ideals and his family's needs became a source of constant conflict. Yet even these drastic changes didn't bring him peace. He remained trapped between two worlds, the comforts of his privileged life and the purity he sought in simplicity. It was as though Tolstoy were trying to escape not just society, but himself. As Tolstoy aged, his desire to retreat from the world grew stronger. He fantasized about leaving everything behind, his estate, his family, even his identity, to live as a wandering ascetic. In private letters, he confessed to feeling suffocated by fame and responsibility. "I'm doing what old men my age usually do, leaving worldly life to live in solitude and silence for my remaining days." On multiple occasions, Tolstoy planned secret escapes from Yasyana Polyana, his family estate. Once, he wrote a farewell letter to Sophia but couldn't bring himself to deliver it. Another time, he turned back halfway after learning Sophia was about to give birth. These aborted attempts revealed how deeply torn he was between duty and desire. It wasn't until 1910, just days before his death, that Tolstoy finally fled for good. In the dead of night, accompanied by his doctor, he left Yasyana Polyana with no clear destination. This final act of rebellion was both a physical escape and a symbolic rejection of the life he had built. Even as Tolstoy wrestled with personal demons, he continued to challenge societal norms through his writings and activism. The horrors he witnessed through the Crimean War turned him into a lifelong pacifist. He denounced violence in all forms, whether on the battlefield or in government policies, and became an outspoken critic of state power. Tolstoy's ideas grew radical over time. After witnessing a public execution in Paris in 1857, he declared governments inherently corrupt and oppressive. "The state is a conspiracy. I shall never serve any government anywhere." This rejection of authority extended to organized religion as well. Tolstoy believed that institutions like the Orthodox Church distorted Christ's teachings for their own gain. He advocated for a return to what he saw as pure essence of Christianity: love, humility, and non-violence. These beliefs alienated him from both church and state but earned him followers worldwide. Figures like Gandhi later credited Tolstoy's writing with inspiring their own philosophies of non-violent resistance. Despite his outward activism, Tolstoy remained deeply conflicted about his role as an artist. For years, writing had been both a refuge and a torment, a way to distract himself from existential dread, while simultaneously confronting it head-on. In a confession, he admitted that even at the height of his literary success, he felt hollow. What is the point of creating, if that will erase it all? He described authorship as a seductive trap, offering applause and wealth but ultimately leaving him empty. Yet he couldn't stop writing. It was as though creation itself was an act of defiance against meaninglessness. This tension culminated in the death of Ivan Ilyich, a novella that dramatized Tolstoy's own fears about mortality and the search for purpose. Through Ivan's agonizing journey toward acceptance, Tolstoy explored what it meant to truly live and die with meaning. After years of searching in vain through philosophy, science, activism, and art, Tolstoy found inspiration in an unexpected place: the lives of Russian peasants. They were people who faced daily hardship, poverty, suffering, death, but lived with an unshakable sense of purpose rooted in faith. Tolstoy realized that meaning wasn't something we could solve intellectually, it was something we experienced through connection and humility. The peasants' simple lives embodied truths that had eluded him in his grand pursuits. Faith over reason. They believed in something greater than themselves without needing proof. Service over self. Their lives were defined by hard work and care for others. Acceptance over control. They embraced life's uncertainties rather than trying to conquer them. This revelation marked a turning point for Tolstoy, but came at a great personal cost. His newfound beliefs alienated him from family and friends who couldn't understand why he would abandon wealth and fame for such radical simplicity. Tolstoy's journey is one of profound struggle, a man who had everything yet found himself lost until he embraced humility and faith. His story resonates because it reflects our own struggles with meaning. How do we reconcile our achievements with life's impermanence? How do we find purpose when reason fails us? How do we live authentically in a world full of contradictions? Tolstoy didn't offer easy answers. He lived those questions every day until his final moments. But through his failures and revelations alike, he left us with this enduring truth: meaning isn't something we fight, it's something we create by how we choose to live. So perhaps the real question isn't what is the meaning of life, but rather how will we give our lives meaning.